going to try to project. We'll go ahead and get started. Thank you all for coming. I'm Shara, use she, her pronouns, and I work here at the Wynne Museum. So before we start, I'd like to start with a land acknowledgement. We at the Wynne Museum acknowledge that we are on the unceded land and waters of the Coast Salish people, with the museum located on the ancestral lands of the Duwamish people. Other Coast Salish peoples living in this region for countless generations include the Muckleshoot, Squamish, Snoqualmie, Tulalip, and Puyallup. They are the first stewards of this land where we live, work, and build community. And they are still here today, continuing to educate, nurture, and protect their lands and cultures, and those of their ancestors. The board and staff of the Wynne Museum strive to go beyond spoken statements and will continue to learn about, support, and partner with tribal enterprises and communities whenever possible. So at this point, I'd like to thank a few people who helped to plan out the program. They are the museum staff members, Maya, Blake, who is helping later with the meet and greet with Lily Barnett, Jessica, Michaela, MJ, who just helped us with the AV, and Vivian, who is helping us get some really yummy food for after this program is over. Also from the community, we'd like to thank Marianne Goto, Jules Etling, and Martha Reyes from the Asian Counseling and Referral Service for helping me to connect for some people with this event. Austin Mormon from Path with Art, Minako Takata Dill, who is an art therapist herself, and helped me clarify what this program could be about. I also thank Lucky, who's in the back doing the videotaping, and all of the panelists and the moderator here today. So as I start, I'm going to, come on in, I'm going to actually ask if some of you can sort of move a little bit over. Sorry, it's, get your blood going, but move over just a little bit, because as people come in, parking is really difficult, and they'll sneak in and they'll want to sit kind of over to the right. So thanks very much for doing that. Okay, and now I gotta switch mediums because so now I'll go ahead and start by introducing our moderator, Matthew Echohawk-Hayashi, uses he, him pronouns, came to the Seattle area from Hawaii, graduated from the UW and serves as a UW trustee. He serves as the principal organization development and leadership consultant for Headwater People, a consulting firm that offers businesses and organizations a variety of services, including strategic planning, change management, and executive coaching, and has a particular interest in community-led projects that improve systems in Native American and AA/NHPI organizations. And he likes to facilitate empowering and emotionally productive experiences. And we had the good luck to have Matt be a facilitator for one of our first retreats when we got back from COVID. So I'm really happy that he's able to be here today to moderate. And he'll be able to introduce you to the panelists, and we'll take the program from here.
That was such a nice introduction. Man, I didn't even know where that came from. That's like, wow. Yeah, my name's Matt. I'm just so grateful to be here too. And I'm grateful for you all to come here in the middle of, like, there's Mariner stuff going on, there's Sounders, there's cracking things going on. But I don't think it's a stretch to say, I think you're all real fortunate to be here today. I got to be with the Wynne Board of Trustees yesterday during their retreat, and I was kind of like bragging about that I get to hang out here again today. One of the things Natacha and I were just talking about that just struck out to me, I just had one conversation with the panelists that we're going to be sharing with you today, and the distinction between healing from and healing for something I'm just so struck by that we get to be in a time. So many of our stories are wrapped up in a lot of traumatic things, and it's been difficult, I think, especially coming out of a pandemic, to really get our heads and our hearts around what does it mean to be healing for something. How can that be a practice? And so I am just really grateful and excited for our panelists, for each of you here. I want to say a quick things about the Reorient, Journeys Through Art and Healing. That's going to be a jumping off point today. The 4 artists featured in that exhibit used their art to work through the traumatic experiences of immigrating and resettling in the U.S. Each artist's work is unique, and you will see a variety of mediums, from ink to textiles to sand and paint. But each artist has used their art as a catalyst for healing and to find a sense of purpose and regeneration in their lives. The exhibit themes resonate with many of us in this post-COVID era. We have the feeling of dislocation, loneliness, loss, and disorientation. So we're here today to explore how we can reorient ourselves, how we can take care of our own well-being for ourselves and for our communities, and focus in on emotional and mental health, as well as our identities, culture, knowledge, and heritage as crucial components of our strength and empowerment. I mean, what's better than that? It's a good way to spend a Sunday in 2023. So I want to introduce our first panelist here. We have Linda Ando, powerhouse. We just met, but you can feel the ancestors emanating from this person, and as well as Dr. Natacha Kune. Linda is a Japanese American descendant of immigrants and a first-generation college graduate in her family. She's the lead academic counselor in the Educational Opportunity Program at the University of Washington. An activist, artist, and community member, Linda speaks up and stands up against institutional and systematic racism, and is a longtime advocate for immigrant, refugee, and diverse communities. Oh, that's a good bio. And I have a sophomore in high school, so we had to talk about how to get into UW. I know. We need a lot of hope there. Okay, and then Dr. Natacha Kune is a director and a counseling psychologist at the University of Washington Counseling Center. She helps to create nurturing spaces while focusing on multicultural issues and improving systems for Asian American, Pacific Islander, queer, trans, and gender non-binary communities at the UW. She's also professionally interested in training issues, spirituality, trauma, and interpersonally oriented counseling. It is just such a pleasure and such an honor to welcome you to the stage.
So thank you for everyone for being here. And we'd like to start off with a grounding for all of us. And if you don't mind, I would like to ask you to, if you choose to close your eyes or keep it open. And we're going to use this singing bowl, Tibetan singing bowl actually, as part of the process. So with the sound of the bell, we'd like you to be present in your body. And take a deep breath in. And take a deep breath out, exhale. And shake it up, shake your body. Loosen it up. And thank you. And we will start our portion of the program. So Natacha and I, at the University of Washington, are part of an initiative that I helped start about 4 or 5 years ago called Cultivating a Culture and Care Initiative. And we're gonna pull up the website. And to talk a little bit about Cultivating a Culture and Care Initiative, which was started and inspired by of a UW student who died by suicide. And the students that were friends with this young man, Jesse Wu, reached out and were struggling. And so we did a community event, a collaboration. And the father of Jesse reached out to me 3 years after we did the event and wanted to donate money directly to student services, and that's how we started Cultivating a Culture and Care Initiative. And we'll pull up the website from our Ethnic Cultural Center, Kelly ECC, where we sort of house some of our resources there. And a little bit technical problem going on, but I'll talk through it. And so through the CCI, which we have t-shirts here, you're welcome to pick one up if you like. During the pandemic, we created 3 videos. So I had a student intern and peer care ambassadors, which includes Han Eckelberg, who works here. And we created 3 videos addressing mental health as well as Asian hate, intergenerational conflicts within families, and using them as tools that hopefully people can relate to. And the website that we're hoping to share with you, there it is. And then, so this is the University of Washington Kelly Ethnic Culture Center and Cultivating a Culture and Care. Natacha, if you could scroll down. These are some of the projects we did in the early years. Taking a pledge to, about mental health, to break the silence, bridging the across generations, and Unite with Love, Stop Asian Hate. We included a lot of different people to speak about Asian hate and how to be a good bystander, and also to make a statement. So this is a site that we welcome anybody to access. And then if you could switch over to the PowerPoint. Okay. So Cultivating a Culture and Care, which we just talked about. Some of the initiative, if you go to number 4, we held a day of remembrance and healing. And we created this altar to remember those that we've lost, as well as recognizing those who are struggling. And we created this garden altar and left it for a week at the Ethnic Culture Center. And succulents are amazing little plants. Little care goes a long way, right? And so what we created this altar and remembrance that people could leave things, put names down. And what we created, we gave it away at the end. Everything was given away to whoever was in attendance. And then we did a Day of Remembrance March, and I recruited our Tackle Kai group to do the blessing with the conch shell and music and sound, and in remembrance of those we lost and in support of those who are struggling. So we did a short walk around the university. And once again, there's so many people that we've lost. Next slide. And some of the other activities that I've been hiring Han, who's part of Mokfa, Kung Fu here in the district, to do self-defense workshop. There's been so much crime happening in the U district. There's a lot of fear. And so it's really been empowering, and students leave feeling empowered that that they can do something. And so that's been a really positive activity. And then we switched over from doing student programming to, we created a new course called Community Identity and Wellness, Asian American and Diasporic Perspectives. Really going deeper and created with a cultural framework to work with students unpacking identity, as well as some of the healing and building allyship. And so this is a new effort, so it's been really fun. Natacha, I recruited Natacha to be the co-instructor. and it's been phenomenal. So we're gonna switch over. I'm gonna have Natacha talk about our course and to share with you.
Thank you. Alrighty, so this has been fun trying to do this course. We've been, and one of the principles that we wanted to use, along with what Matt was saying earlier, we wanted to switch from this idea of mental illness to mental health. And let me take a moment to think about that. If I say mental health, what do you think of? Wellness, that's good. Did anybody think anxiety, depression, trauma? Yeah? Because when we say mental health, we often think of mental health disorders, right? Or mental illness. But mental health is actually us being well, right? Having a sense of purpose in our lives and meaning and connection, right? That's what mental health is. And in the way we talk about mental health, we always talk about it in terms of mental health struggles, right? That we talk so much about mental health in the media right now, and I'm glad, because we used to not talk about it at all. But when we talk about it, it's in terms of struggles. And so we wanted to shift this perspective to what would health look like, right? What are we going towards? What are we aspiring to? And what are some tools to help us get there? And we really wanted to be rooted in being connected to our identities, our communities, our values, who we are. Because there's actually a ton of research, y'all, that says that people who are more connected to who they are, that they have better mental health. And we also wanted to counter a Eurocentric sort of approach to education, which was very intellectually based, and we wanted that to be more holistic. So to think about, how do we take the whole person, your identities, your history, your experiences, and that's a valuable part of the class, right? This is not just like some side note thing. This is an important part of what we share with each other. And what we notice in students is almost this, I can be myself, that they don't get in other settings in the university. So in terms of topics, some of the things we've covered is we're looking at unpacking identities, unpacking family history, migration histories. And the cool thing about that is it's led students to actually connect with their families, be it parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, to say tell me a little bit about this history, right? Because often those are not things we always talk about. And so to be able to do that. So it's helping with intergenerational relationships, and we know sometimes there can be friction there. And so helping students create some context around that to help with those relationships. We're teaching them deep listening with empathy. I think especially post lifting of pandemic restrictions, I think all of us have less buffer, for things. And to take a moment, all I'm gonna do right now is I'm just gonna listen as deeply as I can with my whole body. And then really thinking about positive psychology, right? So not just trauma and post-traumatic stress disorder, but post-traumatic growth. How many of us have heard about that, right? This idea, there's actually quite a bit of research around post-traumatic growth. And so can we also think about that? Can we think about what does flourishing look like, And then really coming into this concept of indigeneity, and so we come at it from a couple of different perspectives. We want to highlight the idea that in particularly Pacific Islanders are sort of lost a little bit in the AA and HPI kind of umbrella, and some of the harm that comes from that, but also indigeneity in terms of so many of what we think of as buzzwords for what's good for your wellness and your self-care, like yoga, like mindfulness. Where did that come from? From our own communities, right? But we don't know that because it has often been co-opted by white communities, right? So to be able to say, no, this came from our community, and how do we want to practice it in a way that feels congruent to us? And obviously, community connections. We wanted the class really to be both creating a community in the class itself, but also helping them connect with the larger community and communities that they belong to.
Great.
All right.
And so, yes, the Community Leadership Group project,
You don't need it.
you could hear me. And
Okay.
so, to keep this short, our students are required for their final project was to propose a health and wellness related project that they create. And we paired them with another student, a team of 2 or team of 3, to illustrate building allyship is also important. And an opportunity not only to do their inner work, but to create something of their own. So they're really excited. And we're funding them $100 budget. They're like, what do we do with this money? Do a trip? No. This is Mr. Wu, who came and did a memorial bench dedication on campus. And I met him for the first time, even though I've been working with him for 5 years. And the students were part of the ceremony, and it was very special. And on the bench, it says, sit, breathe, reflect, you are enough. And so it's a guided meditation. We use that as the, on the bench itself. And so I'll highlight a few of the outcomes. Some of the students have shared in their reflection journals. We filled out, a sheet about our family migration, which was very fun. I got to reflect on how my family has come to the U.S. I realized I knew most about myself, my parents and grandparents. I don't know much about my ancestors' histories, who they were or where they came from. It made me want to ask my parents more about our ancestors, as I really know about them is a lot of our ancestors from both her mom and dad's Chinese side and just not Khmer. So this student is Khmer Chinese. And this one here, just put them in teens, feeling more connected with their classmates. Spoke about my siblings, reached out to some old friends, haven't talked to in a while, was feeling quite unmotivated, and she had an appointment with me. Reminded that I can finish strong, and even when I feel beaten down. I think it starts with giving myself permission to breathe, take small steps, and not go too hard. Not only that, but I have to remember that I have to stay accountable for my own well-being and believe that I deserve to get through this quarter. And so this is a student that's struggling, and she comes from the Tibetan community, so there's a lot of capture. So it's a process. And so I'll have Natacha finish the last 2, and then we'll be done.
Okay. And this was after the bench dedication, really showing that the event was very healing. And the part I want to highlight here is knowing that I am enough is very reassuring. And helping me come to terms with my abilities, exploring future plans, and determining how I can help myself cope with various environments. And then the last quote we'll do is, I felt like I grew even closer and more connected to my classmates. And my word of gratitude was for fellow UW students, and after experiencing this, I feel it was even more true to be grateful to have such kind and compassionate people around me in such an accepting environment where people are looking out for each other. With that, we will stop and with the ringing of the bell.
And just to say, we have a whole course syllabus and content. So if anybody's interested, you're welcome to contact myself or Natacha. And we will end in here. Thank you.
Yes. So key graph for this artist is coming up too. Ammara Touch uses she and they pronouns as a neurodivergent, queer, Khmer plant, witch, poet, organizer, artist, dedicated to the collective healing and liberation. They are deeply moved by love, grief, and the tenderness of feeling, creating art that generates space for others to invite in gentleness, slowness, and just relationships with self, land, and community. It's such a powerful thing in 3 sentences. Please welcome Ammara.
Alright, hello. Hello everyone. It's great to be here. Yes, my name is Ammara. I use she, they pronouns. And yeah, I think today I'm here to talk a little bit about my art process in terms of how it's connected to healing. I think a lot of that is centered around love. And so, oh yeah. Is this better?
Yes.
Better? Okay. Sorry. Yeah, so a lot of what I do explores this idea of how do we love. And I think the idea of love is something that often people think of in specific ways. Sometimes when we think of love, we think about romance, but I think love is so much greater than that. We have love for the land, we have love for communities. And it's really this force, I think, that asks us how do we cultivate communities that can flourish and live and manifest in its most beautiful form. And it's something that really expands through down to our ancestors. And it's, when we think about love too, it can also be about healing. And so that's kind of what I have focused on as somebody who is also grounded in values of abolition, as well as collective care and liberation. I really want to center like, how do we allow our communities to be well? And what steps do we take to do that? So a quote that I have that has stuck with me is this one by Grace Lee Boggs, who is an incredible organizer and activist from our communities, and also Adrienne Maree Brown, who is a Black feminist writer and organizer, who also, had Grace Lee Boggs as a mentor. But transform yourself to transform the world. And I think this is really powerful because it points to this idea that we are interconnected and we are in relationship with each other. So, we don't exist in a vacuum. We live in a constellation of relationships. And Adrienne Maree Brown talks about this idea of fractals, where what is on the small scale is reflected at the large scale. So in one of their references, it's like the health of the cell, like of our own like bodily cells, is the health of the planet. And so kind of taking that framework and thinking about like what that means, I also think about the ways in which our world has become very fractured and how there is like a lot of trauma and a lot of pain, which proves to be barriers to healing. So I think about these bigger systems of oppression, capitalism, colonialism, cis heteropatriarchy. How do these things sever our relationships to land, to culture, to community, to self? We can see this manifest in a lot of different ways. I think the things that I really think about are, the hierarchies and the binaries. So this idea of binaries is a colonial construct. We often think of things as good or bad. I, as a biology and ethnic studies major, who studies environmental justice and has a really big interest in that, I often looked at how conservation really separated humans and nature. They're very separate. They said humans are bad, nature is pristine. We do not belong in there. But the reality is that we are nature, like we are of the land. And so I think because of that, when we produce these binaries and otherness, it allows us to have this sense of entitlement to commit violence. And that's how we see this exploitation of the land, and how we're constantly extracting and committing violence. And so I also think about that in terms of the context of like feelings, because we also use that to assign value and worth to not just other people but ourselves. So when we're even in communities, we also assign
good versus bad people, good versus bad parts of ourselves. And so when we think about like who is worth love, who is worth life, that in itself will also create these ripple effects in terms of how we treat ourselves. You know, if we think that we're not worthy of things, we will also reflect that judgment and that belief onto other people in our society. And so that's how we see these microcosms of violence like just rippling out. And then I also think about like large-scale disconnection too. As a child of refugees and genocide survivors, I really think about the ways imperialism has displaced like my family and my ancestors from their land, and that in itself causes this process of disconnection. You know, I think it's very difficult to not really have a sense of home because I don't have that relationship to the homeland. And in that process too, with genocide and the wars that happened in Southeast Asia, we also became disconnected from our culture. So what does it mean to really not know like where you come from? So I think all of these bigger processes, again, like trickle down into the interpersonal as well. So for me, my journey with art started with plants. I think plants really brought me back to myself. They're so magical, and honestly, if I had more time, I could go hours about plants. So if you want to talk more about plants later, please let me know. But yeah, plants are really incredible. I think right when COVID started, I did an oral history project, and you know, I'm really grateful that my dad is willing to share his stories about, you know, his histories, because the pain that is behind, you know, being a genocide survivor and going through that kind of experience, it's painful. And I know a lot of people in our community don't talk about this stuff, so I'm extremely grateful that he has been willing to do that and offer me a portal into reconnection. But yeah, in these stories, I learned that, you know, the reason really why they survived was because of my grandmother. Yepo, she was a healer. She had knowledge of plant medicine. So when my dad was ill, when other people in the community were ill, she was able to tend to them and heal them. And they're the reason, like those relationships, the plants, is the reason why they survived. And that knowledge was from her father, so my great-grandfather, because he was also a healer in the community. So I think about that a lot, and it has carried with me since to really like think about how I exist because of these relationships, and also recognizing that I have like this relationship to land. I think that's really important because also having been in a biology major, I have often thought that, you know, I was never meant to be a scientist. And so I think finding this relationship, realizing that, you know, our ancestors were always connected to the land, and these plants have always been there for us, supporting us in all these different ways, was really transformational. And so I embarked on this journey of plant medicine in the spring of 2020. I took a course in hood herbalism, which is this community-based herbal education process or project based in the Tonga lands down in California. And I just learned so much that I didn't realize in terms of like how to care and how to love. I think something that plants really taught me is that, you know, again, this interconnectedness, this idea of wholeness. I don't know if any of y'all have heard about the vagus nerve. Okay, I see some nods, that's great. Yes, vagus nerve, extremely powerful, so cool. It's this nerve in your nervous system that connects to all of the organs in your body, and it facilitates this mind-body connection. And so it kind of goes to show too that like your physical body is also a reflection of your emotional and mental like body in that sense. And so I really just learned how, you know, my manifestations of like physical symptoms, like from my nausea to stomach aches to headaches, fatigue, like I didn't realize that that was like a manifestation of like my anxiety and my grief. And so it really made me slow down and like really intentionally listen about like how I was doing, and making me realize that like for a very long time I've refused to listen because these systems like capitalism tell us that we have to ignore our bodily needs, that we just need to work to survive. And I think that is something that we can all relate to at some level. But yeah, so plants are really magical, and this piece is me and my grandmother, and it's kind of discussing how, or reflecting how, she passed away back in 2012. So I didn't really get a chance to know her, and these stories that like I heard were through my dad. So I think there's a lot of grief in like not knowing, or knowing that there was so much knowledge lost in stories when she passed. But I also think that the plants help keep her spirit alive and her legacy. And so I see my art as a way to kind of like record and memorialize those stories as well. Yeah, and so when I think of love, going back to that bigger question, love is grief, love is feeling our feelings, love is healing, and love is just relationships. So when I think about my medicine making journey, I think that really highlighted and centered kind of my role as like a healer, and how I felt like that is something that I really felt called to do in life and in my practices. And I often think about like how plants have also highlighted just the importance of how to navigate grief. I think grief is so key in a lot of things. I mean, right now we live in an age where there's just so much violence happening back to back, like whether it's violence against our elders, our communities, constant displacement, climate change, gun violence, like all of the things. And we see this on social media, and it keeps happening, where there's this sense of urgency of having to know everything, but we don't get the time to process. Like we can't slow down because it feels like this deluge of information just gets overwhelming. And so it's like, what happens to us when we can't process these things? I've really learned that with this unprocessed grief and these emotions, it really takes a toll on us. Feeling our feelings is part of the healing process. So if we're not feeling our feelings, then we're not healing. And that in itself creates this whole ripple of consequences. Because really, we have so many wounds that are asking for attention. If we don't tend to those wounds, it's only gonna get worse. So it's like, yeah, how do we feel? And I think it's important to talk about how with feelings, again, with this binary, we've assigned good and bad values to these emotions. Anger, sadness, jealousy, we think those are bad. But in reality, they're just messengers of our internal state. They're asking for attention because something needs tending to. And so, yeah, there is no such thing as good or bad emotions. They're just emotions. They are part of the human experience. And oftentimes, we're asked to suppress these emotions. And when we do that, we also deny ourselves the ability to be seen and heard. I think one of the things that is really important is that in expressing our emotions, it's an attempt to also connect people. So when we don't allow ourselves to feel, we're also denying that ability for us to really be held in the ways that we need. And I also know that sometimes suppressing feelings can emerge in really violent ways too. We can see that in our society, especially in forms of toxic masculinity, when we see that emotions are feminized and seen as weak and not okay to feel. And so I really think that tending to ourselves and those really soft parts is so important. And so that's kind of where my art comes from, is really asking people to invite that tenderness in. Can we feel? You might notice that some of my art has very soft colors, so it's inviting us into that softness. Yeah, and so I really focus on that because, I've also experienced a level of grief, having, experienced depression, suicidal ideation, and a lot of things post-COVID isolation, postgraduate isolation as well. There's a lot of things that I had felt in terms of this pain, and so I was I saw a quote on Instagram where it was your body is not a coffin for pain. You need to put that pain somewhere else, in art, in connection, creation. And so that's what I did. And I think it's really powerful to think about how, art is a way to process that, to understand that you don't have to be ashamed of your sensitivity, and that, in fact, it's a superpower. And again, art helped me connect to other people when I was really feeling tender and vulnerable. And I started my tender art Tender Yarrow art project like last year. And I was really scared to post my art, but once I did, I received really amazing feedback and affirmation from people, as well as stories about how they had gone through similar things. And I think by making grief and all those other feelings more familiar and less foreign, that kind of like helps break down that barrier of isolation that often our feelings cause us to go into. And I also think art is also a portal to ushering in new alternative worlds. And so I kind of want to close out by talking about how, with my art, it's also about imagining a greater world. How can we cultivate more loving communities? How can we learn to see each other as these magical beings with agency, beings that are whole, and really just creating this world where we don't have to be afraid of our feelings, and we can, usher in that healing like one just relationship at a time. So, yes, if you want to know more, I'm the Q&A, and I also have an Instagram, Tender Yarrow. That's TENDER.YARROW. But yeah, thank you.
I mean, I don't want to minimize therapy, but I feel like that surpassed years of therapy. Thank you. It's a courageous thing to share your art and your stories at that level. I told you it'd be good, right? We're only halfway through. Yeah, thank you. It's been just really rich so far, and I think this is a good point to shout out Jar's leadership too. Like putting together this as a theme is a significant, even for somewhere as like progressive and healing as the Wynne Loop. Having got a vision for this is really special.
It's the whole staff. The whole staff.
Of course, you would say that, yes. So, yeah, the hits will keep on coming. I'd like to introduce Wynne. Wynne Pei uses she and her pronouns. She's a multidisciplinary artist who believes that art, culture, gathering together to play and share time and space is a powerful way to create a sense of belonging, collectivism, and community. As well as her work as Path with Arts, shout out Path with Arts. She's the art manager. Wynne is the director of the Georgetown Super 8 Film Festival and co-owner of Georgetown Records. Yeah, we have to talk after this. She has spent after 20 years assisting and collaborating with other artists while fostering arts-based placemaking interventions that maximize the community's social potential. Wynne has a BA in studio art from Oberlin College and a Master of Social Work degree from the University of Washington. To welcome with me, Wynne Pei.
Can everyone hear me?
Again, closer.
Closer?
Yes.
Right, okay. Can I put on the virtual gallery? I'm gonna go ahead and start because it's just gonna be a guided tour through our virtual gallery. wanted to start by saying sociopolitical Taiwanese artist Wu Tang. Once commented about the idea of a nation that artists imagine. He said that as artists, we have no other place to go. We can only remain in this land. We have to live up to this land's ethics. Wu's work and words really resonate with me because when I make art, I'm carving out another place to reside. I feel that art is the pursuit of an ideal and the enhancement of human existence, to imagine the world as it could be and to strive for that. As an artist, I am beholden to the service of the betterment of humanity in a way that supersedes the laws laid out by government and religion, much like the code of ethics that define the mission of social work. So to me, art and social work are one and the same. I view them both as a form of resiliency, and that informs my approach to others facing hardships, trauma, and oppression. Art, by definition, is a skill acquired by experience, study, and or observation, as well as the conscious use of skill and creative imagination. Critical self-reflection, a necessary instrument in just social work practice, is understanding how one's identity is shaped by dominant ideology and thereby its restraints and regulations on others. So once we master anything, we elevate it to the level of an art form, and which speaks to the strengths-based approach that everyone is the expert of something, and that with critical self-reflection, everyone is the expert on themselves. My artist educator and my mentor and advisor at Oberlin College, Johnny Coleman, says to speak from one's own experience is to empower one's self-creation. So my art education at Oberlin focused on conceptual processing and interdisciplinary learning. This methodology fosters the process of creating works of art that are in dialogue with an idea or a concept, rather than just reproducing what's visible or aesthetic. This methodology also cultivates integrating different avenues of information, changing the rhetoric and disrupting hierarchical structures of power and privilege. The way that I was taught to approach art has helped me connect practice with theory, as well as championing participatory art, placemaking, and community building interventions. Art not only remembers and spotlights the invisible, but at its core, it is creative, regenerative, and transforming. Participatory art and public art spaces therefore give voice to the disenfranchised, build resiliency, a sense of community, and embolden the collective to advocate and care for its own. So what really drew me to the University of Washington's Master of Social Work program is their dedication to social justice and their community-centered integrative practice, the CCIP specialization. This CCIP specialization is a transformative social work practice that uses participatory and community-centered engagement to promote more just, inclusive, culturally responsive relationships, service delivery, and societal change. While I was completing my degree, I did some research on art's role in promoting social welfare within oppressed communities and the less quantifiably measurable benefits of arts-based research and culturally appropriate and informed interventions. During literature review, I found a bunch of information connecting art to wellness and transformative justice. And I have a reference list if anyone's interested in reading any of the cited material in its entirety, but just to summarize and highlight a few. The arts confront how we have learned to see and provide new lenses for looking at the world and ourselves in relation to it. According to principles of Afrocentric methodology, there are beliefs, motifs, and values that are critical to everyday life, but may not be quantified in Western science. Not everything that matters is measurable. Social capital, such as collectivism that Africans heavily rely on, is difficult to measure in scientific terms, but are important to study, particularly when we're talking about serving other cultures. Arts-based research is not inherently feminist, critical, or post-colonial. However, its core values produce the capacity to expose patterns of inequity and oppression and endeavors of transformation and activism. Transdisciplinary arts-based research co-joins historical and theoretical components, intermixing them in the interest of social justice. Art can restore individual dignity. Focusing on human dignity, the notion that a human being is with needs and desires for well-being shifts perception away from people as merely resources and results in dignified action and a humanistic culture. Art and culture not only engage citizens and sustain campaigns, but also utilizes a universal language which allows communities to organize cross-culturally and bridges differences between groups and bonds them into one integrated whole. Cultural practices have healing capacities and are done with the intention of putting people back into relationship with their community and the land. Art spaces that serve as quasi-public spaces thereby act as a buffer to the negative neighborhood effects associated with concentrated, localized disadvantage and contribute to an individual and community's well-being and resiliency. Art that reflects the society's current needs and interests promotes an individual's civil right to exert their creativity for the purpose of improving one's quality of life and maximization of social potential. So I am currently the arts manager at Path with Art. Path with Art fosters the restoration of individuals, groups, and society from the effects of trauma through arts engagement and community building. We're driven by a vision of a world where arts engagement is recognized as transformative, connecting the individual with self, the self with community, and community with society. Since 2008, Path with Art has been at the forefront of a growing international movement that utilizes the power of art as a means to bring dignity, awareness, and healing to the complexities of the issues surrounding homelessness and recovery from trauma. Last year, we reached almost 1,300 individuals with no-cost art classes and programming through exploring different forms of creativity and fostering a sense of community. Participants have reported experiencing a deeper sense of well-being. With over 65 social service and 35 arts and culture partners, of which Wynne is one, we are able to provide multiple entry points to meet a wide variety of needs, from art kits, open studio, access art events, workshops, 8-week classes, leadership and professional development programs. We recently partnered with Natacha, the Director of Research at the International Arts and Mind Lab at Johns Hopkins University, and a national leader and consultant in arts and public health. Natacha has been providing training to our staff, board members, volunteers, and teaching artists, and our teaching artists are paid, and working with us to develop trauma-informed practices for artists and art organizations. So what you've been looking at is a guided tour of our virtual gallery that we put together for those who couldn't make it to the actual physical show at the Art Home. This exhibition is titled Out of the Pandemic, From Isolation to Creation. It's a retrospective exhibition featuring the artwork created by our participants during the pandemic from the start of 2020 to the end of 2022. So we were able to pivot to accessible online programming during the pandemic by distributing free laptops and tablets and providing Wi-Fi hotspots and tech support. This not only allowed participant artists to be in community and use creative expression to work through the trauma of a pandemic together, but it also greatly expanded our geographic reach and connected us with more people impacted by isolation due to mental and physical factors beyond the pandemic. Our 2023 theme is belonging, and so this exhibition is a celebration of resilience and the power of collective creativity. It'll be up until the end of this month, so if you have an opportunity, please come by. We're really close to the Seattle Center, 200 Mercer Street, And we're open to the public Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays from 3 to 5 p.m. This Tuesday, the 9th, the Isidore Quartet is going to be performing in front of this exhibition. The doors open at 5 p.m. This quartet will be working as a resident ensemble with Project Music Heals Us, which aims to provide encouragement, education, and healing to marginalized communities, including elderly, disabled, rehabilitating incarcerated and homeless populations who otherwise have limited access to high-quality live music performances. The ensemble is dedicated to pushing the boundaries of music making and explores the vast landscape of body awareness, mental preparation, and performance practice. So this is a free event. There is limited seating prioritized to our participant artists and those with accessibility needs, with additional standing room. So if you're interested, please go to Path with Art's website and RSVP. If you would like to learn more about the impact of the creative process on mental health and/or would like to support our organization's free and accessible programming, please consider joining us for a night and dinner in conversation with Path with Art participant artists and Dr. Jill Sonke, who is a professional dancer, the director of Center for Arts and Medicine at the University of Florida and lead researcher for the National Arts and Wellness Initiative, One Nation, One Project. Together, they'll be speaking about the power of art on individual and community recovery at our Art Transforms fundraiser on May 23rd at the Paramount Theater. I have invitations with me, or again, you can visit our website and register there. Thank you all so much for your time and interest.
Thank you, Wynne. Go up. No, we're still good. Thank you, Wynne. How encouraging is like a global pandemic can keep arts program calming down? I'm feeling good. Speaking of feeling good, our next presenter panelist is actually the only one of the panelists that I knew before, and just if you know her, the kindest person. Lourdes Velasco, they, them pronouns, is a non-binary, queer, Chamorro parent, mixed media artist, and cultural worker with the Neighborhood Queer and Trans Pacifica and Asian Artist Collective, Flower, Chamorro Artist Collective, and Trans Women of Color Solidarity Network. They explore art, movement, and creativity as a decolonial practice for healing. Welcome to me, Lourdes.
Hafa Day. Oh, I love hearing people say it back to me. If you want to practice, Hafa a day. Yeah, that means hello, welcome in Chamorro. And I'm going to invite Rowdy, my Chesu, my sibling, to help me with my slides and another treat that we have for y'all. But I'm Lourdes, Bahusi Lourdes Velasco. I'm going to talk a little bit about being Chamorro, the intersection of queerness and my healing. Yeah, it's an honor to be here. I've done a lot of beautiful work with the wing. Recently, we have an exhibit with Youth Can. You should check it out on the second floor. It's called Resistance at Home. And I was one of the teaching artists of many through Flower, but I've also done work with the wing in the Youth Can program, like DIY screen printing. There's a lot of really rad history here, so I'm so honored to be here. Could you go to the next Yeah, so as you heard, I'm Gela or queer in Chamorro. I'm a non-binary parent. I do a lot of art and community, so I feel really grateful to be here. Duwamish territory, Coast Salish land has helped me for probably 16 years now and has been a big part of like my artist practice here in Seattle. So this is my kiddo and my dog. I do a lot of illustrative work, but they're definitely the heart of the work that I do too. You can go to the next slide. And speaking of parenting, this is Elijah. He's 14 years old. We're from the South End, so he's a South End kid. And he's definitely been very important being in my life and has been a big part of my healing. And I get really emotional talking about him. As a young parent, I feel like he really helped me reconnect to my indigeneity. He really helped me reconnect to what it means to have my roots being from an island in the Pacific. Because he's at an age now, I don't know if y'all remember being 14, you're like, who am I? Like, what do I like? And so he asked me a lot of questions because he's mixed, he's Mexican and Chamorro. And we recently got to go back to Guahan with Rowdy and our group Mali'i, 13 Chamorro artists that got to go back home. Half of us live back home and half of us are of the diaspora. But it was his first time going back to our homeland. And one of my favorite memories was we did an interview for the cultural project that we're a part of, and he volunteered to be a part of the interview. And they asked, oh, like, what are you happy about, like, to be back here? And he was like, I'm just really happy to see my mom happy. And I was like, oh. And he's like, and I want to be in the water. I don't want to be in this interview. So, but anyways, like the big part of like what has really healed, if I'm gonna get more in the spotlight, healed my work is just thinking about this art piece. This picture was taken by my sister, and I created it into art for a zine called Decolonizing Parenting. And the poem says, decolonizing parenting takes root in my healing, planting seeds of resilience in my child to heal and grow is decolonial love. And he is just my heart. If anyone that knows me, he just continues to teach me, like slang, how to use Apple Pay, and what it means to like do intergenerational healing. And I think his presence, again, like really helped me usher and cultivate and reconnect to my Chamorro identity, because he wants to learn language. And I think for many folks that may not know about Guahan and the Northern Marianas, we are a people in the Pacific, and you know, this is API or AANHPI Heritage Month, and I just want to encourage everyone to remember the Pacifica people of that acronym of this month. I'm also like, you know, the labels are colonial in themselves, but when we think about the ways that we are rich in history, and a lot of the panelists that were here today talked about connection, community, healing. There's so much rich, deep healing in history and connection to land, connection to ancestry that RPI communities have, and have stories and stories to tell. So when we're thinking about research, when we're thinking about community, and this month in particular, I ask y'all like deeply to remember our Pacifica relatives. So this picture was in Guahan during our Liberation Day parade, which is complex because Liberation Day in Guahan was talking about the history of World War II, where the US came in and saved us, quote unquote, from Japanese imperial rule. And so a lot of our work right now for people back home indigenously, we're talking about true liberation really means decolonization. That means land back, right? But that also means like our people want sovereignty, and that also means from US militarization and colonial rule. And so when we think about decolonization, it also means the US's presence too. So I'm gonna go more into that in a second, but you can go to the next slide. So I love trivia, and I love animals, and particularly actually whales. There's like a new orca baby in the J-pod in the Salish Sea here, so learn about that. But I want to take y'all to Guam and the Marianas. And I think it's important for me to name that because Guam is often known as like the dominant like narrative within our islands, but we have many other islands in the Marianas that you should learn about, from Saipan to Ritidian, Tinian, and Rota. But this is the Mariana 8-spot butterfly, and I wanted to do a little trivia. Rowdy does trivia here all the time, so please tune in to their trivia. But they inspire me. So I wanted to know, y'all can make a guess, or unless you know, and nerd out like me, how many host plants does the ababang, the Mariana 8-spot butterfly, depend on to survive? Is it 1, 2, or 5 plants? You could just shout that. 1, 5, I hear 5. It's actually 2. But thank you for guessing. The next one. I appreciate y'all. So there's 2 host plants, the Tupo Nazuzu and the Procris pedunculata. I don't know how to pronounce some of those words, but they occur in like the wet and shaded native forest areas in our jungles. And they're exposed like to the limestone. So our limestone forests are really important to the flora and fauna of our community. And as caterpillar, they feed on the Tupo Nazuzu, and then they often lay their eggs on the other plant too. So you're probably wondering, like, why are we talking about the 8-spot butterfly? Well, they're really important to me. I have tattoos of them on my body, but they're also a part of our indigenous movement for land back and resistance towards the US militarization of our islands. So if you go back to the next slide, go to the next slide, thank you. This is a portrait I did of one of our Tetlus, our siblings back home, who is queer, who is indigenous, and is often at the front lines. And I feel like a lot of people, especially trans and queer people in our communities, are often the cultural bearers, the people who lead and create healing within our communities. So I did this piece to honor Monica Flores Ornate, but also the movement called Proteji la Texan back in home, which means Save Ritidian, which is sacred land back home in Guahan, that the US military continues to want to use to create a massive firing range. And as we know, the militarization of our islands, of our lands, I think about Cop City here, right, in the US too, like the resistance towards that and our connections to Black and Indigenous solidarity. There is really powerful movements thinking about the ways that we need to protect our water, we need to protect our land for generations to come. And with this massive firing range built by the military, it not only impacts our lands, but it impacts our water aquifers too. So it's destroying acres of sacred land. So this piece is to bring light to that, and as you can see, there's the 8-spot Mariana butterfly. And so when you think about this desecration of sacred land, that also impacts the limestone forest, that the 8-spot Mariana butterfly depends on those 2 plants that y'all learned about. So the babang has definitely been a pillar, important symbol to this movement of indigenous resistance. This is Nate. I just wanted to show more pictures of them. They're so awesome, and I'm excited to see them when we go back home. We're actually going back in July too. And Proteji la Texan. I definitely call y'all to look out more of their work. This is their Instagram as well, Proteji la Texan. You can learn more about the movement work that's happening at home. Next slide, please. When we think about our movements as well, water, right? I think hanam in our language is water. This portrait is a portrait I drew of my niece, who is both Kanaka, Hawaiian, Native Hawaiian, Kanaka Maoli, and Chamorro, as well as Filipino. And when I was thinking about what was going on due to the naval bases in the Navy back in Hawaii, of poisoning a lot of the water there, it's connected, right, to the US military's presence in Guahan as well and in the Marianas. So when we were doing these movements of thinking about water's life, as well as like the indigenous movements here, Standing Rock, if we think about that too, there was solidarity between Kanaka and Chamorro people back home, thinking about the ways that we can really resist together collectively. So I drew this portrait of my niece, and to honor not only her ancestries, but to think about the generations to come. And in the front of that dress are actual Chamorro pottery motifs that I'll talk a little bit more about soon too. But this was to bring awareness around Guam environmental protection agencies to help push them to deny a permit that the Anderson Air Force Base was creating to do an open burn and open detonation on our island. So to give y'all context, our island has about a third of our island is occupied by the US military. And if you think about the distance of our island, it only takes over an hour to get from one point to the other. So imagine a third of your island and not having access to actually really pristine, sacred land. So there's a lot of work that's going on with that, but I think connecting the ways of indigenous resistance to art is definitely dear to my heart. And I just wanted to show some of the images of protests and beautiful gatherings of our indigenous people back home, specifically in Guahan. And these were photos from Patahila Texan's Instagram as well, and talking about denying the permit, building solidarity specifically with Hawaii and Kanaka Maoli back home too. And the next slide, please. More photos. And then, being able to protect our aquifers. One of my hopes too is I love drawing portraits. Oh, thank you for that time check. I love drawing portraits, and I hope to build a series of portraits of folks back home and protest signs. Because that's a really long history of our people too resisting US colonization. You can go to the next slide. Another trivia question. So, the cocoa is the Guam morel, and I was just curious, is this statement true or false? The cocoa is a flightless bird.
False. True.
It's true! Ratty was trying to trick y'all. They really did. You can go to the next slide. So the reason I'm bringing that up, the cocoa is a really cool bird. They're in a lot of cool history. But this was a fashion show that Rowdy actually helped curate and plan and was a designer of at the opening of the reopening of the Seattle Asian Art Museum, and it's called Birds of Paradise. But this is our group Umat which is a Chamorro artist collective. And when I think about health and mental health, this is a group that has really helped me through really hard things, and has been an integral part of my healing because you get to connect our identities as queer people, as Chamorro people, and to explore indigeneity. So if you want to go through the slides. So the idea behind this that Rowdy was magically put together was creating these beautiful bird regalia, bird inspiration from our indigenous birds back home. And so I created these collages to be able to showcase the designs of Rowdy in relation to each bird that we were. And you can go to the next slide too. So to give y'all just a little bit of information why birds are so important to our islands as well throughout the Marianas is I always think of this as a metaphor of US occupation, but the brown tree snake is an invasive species that actually came over through cargo in the end of World War II. And the brown tree snakes love birds. So they could climb trees, they're really intense. They actually wiped out majority of our indigenous birds, endemic birds to our islands. So the cocoa that you saw earlier is actually being reintroduced to our indigenous lands because they're repopulating. A lot of US zoos have also supported the repopulating of the cocoa and the sea hick, which is in the middle. That's my niece that was in the portrait too. You can go to the next slide. I think I'm supposed to wrap up soon. So the aga, and then finally, I just wanted to talk a little bit about this scene that we did through Gumat Galat that I was able to help edit and illustrate for, but it's the Gwaizats and Puspus, Love and Sex Scene. It actually was created because we talked about the isolation and loneliness and needing for touch and like care during the pandemic. So me and Rowdy on nights, we would just like talk till like hours in the morning, and we're like, we should make a scene. And so this is the first of its kind, and Rowdy actually has some to sell today. It's like 20 Chamorro queer and trans artists talking about sex and love. It is 18 and up because there's a little, you know, like just a little risque photos. So a few, just so you know, like. But you also can access it on Issue online. We have a link to it too for free. Go to the next. I feel like I'm gonna stop there. Oh, I'll close with this. So this was inspired. This design is a screen print I made and drew because of our trip back home last year, and I'm reproducing more of these, so they may be for sale, so you can check out my website in a little bit. But it's the kalau and the gausali. If you go to the next slide, it's the actual images of them. So the gausali is this beautiful white flower that is said that our ancestors saw as sources of light. But they're also really important. When I think of Ammara's presentation, they were a symbol of love. And the reason for that, we talked about limestone forests, right? Limestone cliffs, you have to scale them to actually reach these beautiful flowers. So it was seen as an act of love. If someone was willing to climb these cliffs, they loved you. They're giving you this, they loved you. So there's that, and then the kalau. My kiddo got really sick when we were back home. I think it was like the air conditioning and the air circulation that got messed up. So one of our few of our friends in our group were like, hey, there's actually plants in the jungle that you can use and like boil to be able to help with his cough and help with like his, his sickness. So we were able to boil the kalau, and these were just two really important, because if you look at the pollen on the bottom, that's where all the goodness is from. But that inspired the ways I made this bandana as like just a connection, a reconnection to home. And that's Rowdy modeling it. I don't know if you could tell. That's their body, that's their hands. But yes, to summarize, I know I'm over time, but thank you. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for thinking about land, water, indigeneity, queerness. These are all integral things that I think about when I think about healing. And also to remember our young people, remember our elders. We call them manangku, we call them famagu'un. Like our people really believe in interdependence and this idea of inafamalic, to do things in a good way. So I ask y'all to think about that in your days, or keep it in your heart. When we think about healing, what does it mean to being connected to land, to spirit, to water, to each other, and to love? Thank you.
Can you announce the opening for
Oh,
Natacha?
yes.
June 10th.
Yes, is it 10th or the 9th? Is
I
it
think
the 10th?
it's the 10th, it's Saturday.
Okay,
but-
so we actually have an exhibit coming up on Gumat Gala, the group that you saw. And it's going to be really beautiful. So June 9th or 10th? It's on the Saturday, whatever day that is. 10th, thank you so much. June 10th, check the newsletter. Please check out our exhibit. It'll be up for a whole year. And where will it be located again?
The art gallery.
The art gallery. So yeah, the opening will be June 10th. Please come.
You may see some dancing, some poetry, some drag. Yeah.
Miguel Moasi, thank you so much.
Thank you, Lourdes. That's, man, I love to end with like some aspiration. Let the light in. Beautiful. Oh, so thank you so much, and thank you to all of our panelists. Can I invite you all to come and take a seat here? Can you hear me okay without the mic?
Yes.
Sort of?
Sorry to say that we don't have a whole lot of time, but I'm not sure if you're willing to take like one or two questions, and then after that we'll let people go up to the gallery if they want to. The exhibit curator, Lily Barnett, is here, so Lily and Blake will go upstairs and be in
Yeah, so we'll try for like one or two, so, let's see, like, be bold, fortune flavors the bold. Did you have a question? No? Yeah, never, sorry, pretend smile. Anyone have a question? Okay, I have a question. And any of y'all can take this. For me, I hear so much, it's like there's been a generational shift in this conversation. How are you thinking about that in this time where there's something particularly happening now that you see that, to me, seems like you're a part of?
I think we have noticed a lot of young people that are going through college, because that's where we work, are more forthright talking about I have mental health issues and ongoing. And that shift has been good. There's such a need, and to break the silence is so important. And an institution, it's not easy. So that shift of speaking about it, but there's not everyone speaking about it. And the complexity of identities and so many traumas, right? So it's so important, all the work that everybody's doing in this room, right? To reach out and to provide some kind of care and support where you often don't feel like anybody cares, or you don't feel like someone else is dealing with the traumas and pain. So having post-traumatic growth, which we talked about, is so important, because that is possible to do, but we really need to be able to create that shift for individuals.
There's a middle one. After that?
Can you repeat the question?
Just like, is there a generational shift that's happening?
Yeah, I can speak as a parent, and just like thinking about my kiddo, I've definitely noticed, like when we think about like mental health and trauma, coming from parents and generations before us that didn't talk about these things. And I think for me as a person who navigates depression, anxiety, suicidal ideation, I thought it was really important for me to really name that to my child, to talk about like mental health and like that. Not only, I think it's really important that we talk about the ways in which we are healing, but I also found that there's a lot that our young people also are ready to talk about, and to like allow my child to have awareness and like, hey, if this is something that I'm holding and I'm feeling, there's also a chance that you may navigate this too in your life. So what does that mean to know? Like if I knew my parents were also dealing with depression and anxiety, like it would have made me feel less alone and like to feel more connected to this process. So yeah, I think the culture is shifting in different ways. Like our young people, especially Gen Z, is so amazing. And they speak out and they definitely advocate for their needs, and I see that with my kiddo too.
Cool, like an intergenerational shift.
To me, this is an example of post-traumatic growth. In some ways, if you think about, what has come before us, is so much trauma, and then there's the trauma of the pandemics that occurred, and so I think in some ways we're needing to come out of this with a sense of meaning, with a sense of how do we move forward from this in a way that feels positive, and this is one of the answers we're sort of fumbling towards, and I think, and I like it.
What's where, Well, we need to thank you all again for being here, being present, being the kind of people that can share this kind of thing. That's tremendous. And for the stories that you brought, not just today, but the stories that you've been working on for months and weeks and years. Can we just give another hand of appreciation? Announcements that you've already heard, the upcoming exciting events on June
10th.
10th, right? I have 3 more announcements. There's a resource list for when you're in crisis or need help that's available. You can scan the QR code. The QR code is up there by the t-shirts. And there's also hard copies if you'd like to take one. From now until 1:30, please feel free to visit the Reorient exhibit. That's what kind of our launching off point. And you can meet with the actual curator, Lily Barnett, and the museum exhibit developer, Blake Nakatsu. That's on the 2nd floor in the George Tsutakawa Art Gallery. And then from 1:30 to 2:30, there's still room in the art workshop with Tuan Wynne, who will guide you to use ink brush and markers to express your stories of healing and joy with the option of contributing your story to Tuan's never-ending comic project. You can sign up at the front desk if you'd like to attend this free workshop. Man, go Wing Luke. So thank you for coming on today. Please take advantage of things that's available. Our panelist is going to stick around. We're gonna transition.
Yeah, we'll transition, but I think we can stay here. There's food in the back, and feel free to help yourself. And if you had any other questions for the panelists, if you can stay for a few minutes, if people want to ask questions, that would be great.
If anybody wants a free t-shirt, you're welcome for yourself or for gifted to others.
With that, we're going to transition. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for coming.